Welcome to the CompTIA Network Plus N10 008 exam. This is Chapter 2, Cabling and Topologies. I credit notes and the visuals to Total Seminars Corporation 2023. All rights reserved. Okay, so let's talk about the objectives in this video. We're going to look at 1.2, explain the characteristics of network topologies and networks. 1.3, summarize the types of cables and connectors and explain which is the appropriate type for a solution. 5.2, given a scenario, troubleshoot common cable connectivity issues and select the appropriate tools. Okay, before we start, I'm going to do something a little different. So I want you to reflect for a bit and ask yourself. So let's ask ourselves these questions. How did networks begin? How did we get here? It's a pretty broad question. Okay, what kind of limitations do you think they had? Well, they're much older. Probably don't perform as well. We studied the hub at layer 2 last lesson. So that's pretty important to know layer 2 in the physical connections on the network and the network itself. Okay, so here is a brief history of computer networking. I just found some cool visuals. Let's go back pretty far. Let's think about 1950 era. It took a lot of work, experimentation, and intellect to design our modern networks we have today. But what about before then? Computer networks were born in the late 1950s. There was a technology race between two sides of the world. Information technology was in its infancy at this time, but it was about to explode. Both sides of the world were very eager to show their technical dominance and to prove that they were superior to their nemesis, right? Pretty much. Today we really take for granted things like USBs. So we can just plug in a USB to a computer and probably will work. Well, most of the time it will. Today with modern technology. But it was not that way before. They had all kinds of specialized different hubs that they use. They don't have Ethernet cables. They use like DB9 and these funny looking connectors that go onto the sides. Parallel ports were very common for different things, and even people wanted to put IP addresses on everything. They were getting tired of doing everything at the MAC level. Could you imagine living in such a complex world like this? Today, everything is so simplified and compatible. Things just work, and they're pretty reliable. If we plug in a device, it works. Fortunately for you, you don't need to know these things. I just think they're cool. But the Network Plus will pretty much start in the 1980s. So let's go to 1980. All right. Have you heard of a bus or a ring? Well, you probably would never see them today in the wild. They're way too old. But what if we didn't have a hub? What if we didn't have a centralized connection? What if we just had a wire? And that's exactly what we had at that time. So there were a lot of technologies and network technologies that had been invented up to this point. But there were nothing really so universal. Everything was specialized and proprietized, and you had to use a certain kind of cable and a certain kind of network infrastructure, and it just was too messy. So in 1984, IBM invented the token ring, and then it became standard late in 1989. So by the late 80s, this is what a computer network usually looked like in the most common ways adopted at that time. There were other types of technologies, but this was most popular. Okay. Let's take a look at the ring network. I think it's cool. It like travels in a certain way and just repeats until it finds who it needs I mean, it just keeps going. So it's different from the bus, which goes back and forth. Okay, so those were the two most popular network technologies at that time, or sorry, topologies. However, they had their limitations. Let's look down here. What if some sort of data went to the wire and the wire was broken? Well, now the whole network is down. Nobody's getting any information. Same exact problem happens on the bus network. If a cable breaks somewhere, nobody can really do anything. So there wasn't much fault tolerance at all during this time in the 80s. They weren't thinking about those things. And look at the different connectors they had to use these networks, and the IBM connector, different things like that. I think it's pretty interesting because I've never seen that before. I'm too young, I guess. Okay, moving on. Star. Star was a huge success, and a lot of people loved the star topology. Why? Because it used a hub. So these specialized hubs we were kind of looking at earlier could connect a single wire to a single computer, and if that computer had a problem or if that cable had a problem, it didn't matter. You can just move computers in and out. You can replace the cable and you're good to go. It doesn't affect anyone else. So this was highly preferred from the network technicians working in the 80s and early 90s. So most people thought the star was the future. Okay. Next network topology is the hybrid. I think this is kind of strange. We're just taking the star that we just saw, some sort of hub, and then we allow the ring. It's just odd. It's like a light bulb. Okay, so we have a ring in here and we have a segment in here. They're like terminated, and then they, I guess, go out that way. Interesting, a bit different. But yeah, they basically turned the star topologies into these new hybrids that were a pre-existing topology. Now it's kind of mixed with the star topology using a hub. So the hub was a success. Everyone loved the hub. The hub was the future. Okay, what about mesh? Mesh topologies were kind of at the end of this era. Some people had these networks and different segments and networks, and things got complicated. Some people wanted to use, you got a ring here, and you got a bus here, and then you got a star here. So you can kind of mix it up however you want. I think that's pretty cool. It's pretty inventive and intuitive. But mostly in today's world, you'll see like ad hoc mode on laptops in different ways. They connect and share info if you don't have wires. So that's kind of more common to see in a wireless network these days, a real star mesh here. But yeah, using cables is generally more reliable on bigger networks. Okay, moving on, cables are going to change. To be honest with you, this is a very old technology. The coaxial cable started in the 1880s, but it wasn't really until AT&T used it to send data across intercontinental networks in 1940. So the reason why they are popular is because they don't have to deal with interference so much. If there's some sort of signals like giant TVs or like a satellite or a radio or anything like that, it could interfere with the signal and stop it from transmitting it correctly. So these were popular. Moving on to maybe television, and then they realized, well, we can use this for television. Maybe we can use it for internet too. Here's an example of what it looks like, a real picture. You can see that it's very well shielded and braided. Lots of protection, and then you have the main wire here. This is what the F-type interface looks like. And you can just screw it in to the equipment you're using. You could use a BNC connector to extend it if you need to. So there were options for these types of cables. The RJ9 cable was popular for home TVs. people got creative using coaxial cables and different ways to transmit them. So there are different barrels and adapters that they used. So the next generation of the coaxial cable is the RG6, and that's used for cable modems and internet. Both the Radio Guide 6 and the Radio Guide 59 have an ohm rating of 75, which that means it prevents a certain amount of interference. Okay, well, we're going to take the coaxial cable and call it a twin axle cable. Can you guess why it's a twin axle? Well, I do see twin cables in there. So that means that it can send and receive data back and forth through one line. Okay, moving on. We have shielded twisted pair and unshielded twisted pair. So this one is similar to the idea of the coaxial cable. We have some shielding around it. Not quite as sturdy, but better than nothing. And here's one without any shielding. I won't really get into all the specific types and all the names because that'll take too long. You can just read this if you want and pause the video. Okay, moving on to the CAT standardizations. So here we can see Cat 3 all the way to Cat 8. Wow, things have really changed in a short amount of time. I think it's quite impressive to see how quickly technology can advance if we're motivated to do it. So Cat cables are a good example of this. I see a lot of Cat 5e and 6 today. 10 gigabits seems to be like, the standard now. It's no longer the gigabit. But we go up even higher. So some of these fiber networks can use these Ethernet cables and get really great throughputs of over a gig or so per second. Isn't that amazing? Okay. Another reason why Cat cables were so popular is that you could design your own, which was pretty cool. So anyone who had some basic knowledge of cable stripping and cable crimping could cut the cable off, make it as long or as short as they want, and then crimp it down to be with the Ethernet RJ45 jack, or I guess you could even do an RJ11 jack if you wanted. Okay, so we're on to the last part, fiber optic cabling. Does this look similar at all to the coaxial cable? Because it looks pretty much the same, doesn't it? It's almost a copy. Okay, so you can see in this picture, they have the core. This is where the fiber light goes through. It's just a little tiny light strand, really small, almost like a guitar string. And it just goes through and transmits light. You have cladding. You have a buffer for protection, and you have a jacket for protection. Just to ensure that the cable doesn't move or snap or break. So they're usually pretty sturdy. Okay. And then from left to right, I'm going to talk about these cables. The first one is the ST or straight tip, and the second one is the SC or subscriber channel. They use a simplex signal, meaning they only transmit one way. So if you need to set up fiber optics, you need to use two of these for send and receive. However, we kind of got tired of that, and then we invented the Lucent connector, or we also say LC cable, which is duplex already. You just need one. It can send and receive. That's why you see two ends on it. Okay. Now it is the end of chapter 2. Oops. We got a pop quiz here. Okay, what early network topologies needed termination? We did go over that. Do you remember? What network system had the first fault tolerance? That was a pretty big deal to make fault tolerance. If a cable broke or a computer had a problem, the network can keep transmitting and being productive. 3. What is the most popular fiber cable today? We'll give you a second to think. You can pause the video if you want. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. What early network topologies needed termination? And the answer is the bus. We need to cut off the bus and let it know where it ends. It's not like the ring that just keeps going and going and going. It just sends back and forth. Okay, question number 2. What network system had the first fault tolerance? We learned about the star topology, which had a hub that connects to all these devices. So if one device or one cable breaks or needs to be replaced, it's quite easy to do that. That was pretty groundbreaking and important for network administrators all around the world at that time. What is the most popular fiber cable today? And we learned about the simplex and duplex capabilities of fiber, and the answer is the LC, or the Lucent connector. How do you feel after this video? Did you learn something new? Did you gain more confidence in yourself? Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good night.